I think we are live, and today we have Mr. Marcelo with us. Marcelo, thank you again for joining us. We've been looking forward to having you again.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to joining you again after a little while away. It's nice to be back in the Agile Genesis offices, virtual as they might be and stuff. I've been keeping up with your webinars with Peter and some other folks and stuff, and waiting my turn patiently.
Well, we are here and we are glad that we have you. And this one is a special edition because we are going to talk about 2024. We're going to try to encapsulate what an interesting year that has been for the industry, for practitioners, for organizations, and teasing it into 2025, right?
Right.
We're going to be having a webinar that is premium webinar content at the beginning of the year, where we're going to be revealing some additional data that we've been collecting and making that available. But today we wanted to share a little bit of some of those pointers. We're not going to have enough time today to go into all of them, so we'll have a comprehensive readout of those. And we'll also have the results of the extensive end of year survey that we're going to be sharing here for folks to also participate if they're interested, to sharing their initiatives for 2024, how those played out, and in 2025, what are the top initiatives in regards to agile practices and transformation. So a lot of what we do is connecting practitioners, connecting leaders, connecting organizations to be more agile. This is in the spirit of continuing to connect everybody and sharing in the journey that we are all experiencing with agile transformations, implementations, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as I like to say. Right? So with that, Marcelo, how was 2024 from an agile perspective? What are some of your top of mind items? And then I'm going to pick out a few of the poll data that we have that it's pretty interesting, some of the patterns that we're seeing. So what are your thoughts?
Well, when you first floated the idea with me, my thoughts. I don't know if you remember when we first talked about this. I my words were, at least in my head, I don't know if I said it out loud this way, but I felt like saying it out loud, was like, "Gee, boss, do we have to?" 2024. Yeah, if you wanted to ride a roller coaster continuously for an entire year, this would have been it. More so than even, I would dare say, the first year of the pandemic. This year has just been one great big roller coaster ride. I mean, I don't want to spoiler alert it too much for the folks that are following us right now live. But I'm just going to say one of them is Agile dead. We could spend a half an hour on just that alone. But there's so much.
Let's spend some time on it. Let's do it. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely not. Or rather, it, as in the things that Agile is about, the stuff that's behind the funny word, are most certainly not dead. If anything, they're even more important today than even they were at the beginning of this year. And I would say that they are even more paramount despite all the supposed dismay and things that have been flung around about different approaches to the things behind the phrase agile or the word agile. Things have been levied against Scrum and other approaches to work during the year, and then just lobbed into one bucket. But the fact is that regardless of all those other words, the things that are promoted by talk to each other people, collaborate, cooperate, coordinate, those things, they never go out of style. They never go out of fashion. They never go out of importance. If anything, they become even more crucial when we don't remember that that's what we're trying to achieve, right? I mean, it's what are we actually trying to achieve by this stuff? We want collaboration. We want cooperation. We want coordination. What do those things get us? Results.
And I'll put the data forward. Is Agile dead? So we had 80 participants in that poll,
Mhm.
and 85% of the participants said no, it's evolving. And I feel
Mhm.
that that's insightful, right? Because
Mhm.
it's about the fact that perhaps the way we think about what
Mhm.
Agile is
Mhm.
changing. And this catchy
Mhm.
statement that, frankly, I think is very short-sighted, is Agile
Mhm.
dead, or because someone proclaimed it to be so, and now everybody talks about it in that sense, is it's really about, is Agile changing? Is Agile gone? I'll give you the
It,
rest of the data. So we've had other individuals. Only 10% of the participants agreed that yes, it's outdated, outdated, and the rest, that was 5%, said not
right.
sure. So by and large, many folks, or 85% of the voters, said Agile's evolving. Yeah.
Yeah, that it
And
is it is it's still relevant, you know?
by yes. So I have a much harder stand on that, or
Mhm.
harsher stand. I
Mhm.
believe that superficial Agile, off the shelf Agile, is dying fast, to use that term, right? It's very,
Mhm.
very quickly becoming a um, a thing of the past, because, well, Agile is old. Not in the sense that it's outdated, but Agile has been around for a while. And many people have had the opportunities to understand the basics, the 353s if you're doing Scrum, right? Um, but now people have an appetite for more impactful change. Show me more.
Mhm.
Give me the good stuff.
Mhm.
Those practices, if you're an agile coach, and you're telling me, look, you need to communicate, but you're not showing me how to do that with practices that are proven to work, that have outcomes that can be shown, then you're not that useful to me, right? I
Mm.
need I need someone that is going to walk me through how to do this, right? Not
Mhm.
give me the end result. It's almost like if you have if you have a personal trainer who tells you, well, look, what you need to do is get stronger. Well, of course,
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
do that, right?
right, yeah, it's like saying, I know I need these skills, but I don't need you to tell me just tell me these are the skills that I need, okay? And then on top of that, to sit back and say, well, how would you go about acquiring those skills for yourself? It's like two poles, of different things are like, which, where am I? Well, just like many things, you need to be able to engage. I think that's what we've been missing, is that engagement with the people who need help, to actually get, and I'm just going to say it, get our hands dirty.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a term for sure, and that's what it is. I think we need to get people. Agile must have a lane. What's the Agile lane? Agile's been pretty all over everybody's lane, right? It's been on the PMO side, it's been on the COO side, it's been on the
Well,
organizational C-suite, it's been at the team
you,
level.
you know, yeah, that's the funny part is, and that, I guess that's what's gotten a lot of folks turned off to it, that they've they've applied it contextless, when every one of those things that you just said, right? The C-suite, the PMO, HR, those are contexts, and you have to contextualize what does it mean in this context. And then what's really going to bake people's noodles is how do you dovetail the contexts into each other? Because they're not islands. Okay, when we treat each one of those contexts as islands, that's when we also run into trouble. Okay, and when our organizations run into trouble, because they're all connected, and that connection of context is also part of what we should be able to bring to the table to help them how to connect the context as well. But but that's what I've been seeing.
Yeah,
That,
if you, I think there's a lot of confusion out there. Look, there was a lot of superficial agile, and I think that's sort of what's being weeded out. If
Yep.
you're just coming in and you're calling it in, and
And
you're
superficial
a
coaching.
coach or a scrum master, or an individual who's just going through the motions,
Yeah.
you're going to be out of work pretty quickly, right? Because
Mhm.
you need to be deep into the practices that are going to
Mhm.
show results, right? And when I said stay in your lane,
Mhm.
it's a pretty broad lane, but you need to know what we do. Um,
Mhm.
I'll stick with that comparison, right? A COO is operational excellence, strategic execution, and it's efficient in at the organization level.
Mhm.
All clear, all understood, right? Sounds a lot like an agile coach, doesn't it? Right? But
Yeah,
when we look at
absolutely.
it from the
I see
perspective
no
of an agile
reason.
transformation,
I see no reason why a COO could not function doing some of what we've typically called coaching. Okay. And I wouldn't even use the word agile. Okay. I'll call it coaching. Okay. Because the fact of the matter is that the COO is in a position operationally, as you said, they're strategic, but they're also a bit tactical because they have to keep their finger on the pulse of the day to day as well. Okay. And they have to be able to engage with their people, sometimes at varying levels. Okay. If I refer back to the principles of lean and the Toyota production system, going to Gemba, going to where things are occurring, okay, and being able to engage with the people there. There are times that a coach has to go on the field and talk to the players, okay, or call the players in and have a chat with the players, okay, and convey clarity of this is our stated goals. These are why our goals are what they are. Okay, you guys know how to achieve goals, right? How can I help you achieve goals?
well, and more than that, tell me how that occurs. Give me the practices. We are
Oh
in
yeah,
the
even so, yeah.
business of implementing practices that drive results.
Oh
No
yeah,
ifs or buts about that.
yeah.
This is not there. There's too much. Let's hold hands, sing kumbaya, and as long as you have a happy team, you're going to have a great company. No, no, that's what is dying. That kind of approach. This is about what are the things that I need to do. What our job is to increase responsiveness, to get faster delivery, or to teach individuals and to provide the practices that enable that. And what does a culture of continuous improvement look like? Give me the practices, the techniques that are going to create that outcome. Not, well, you need continuous improvement, and you do that by constantly looking at, inspecting, and adapting. Good luck, right? That's what's dying.
Mhm.
Instead, if you told me, why don't we jump at another point in our data that's actually pretty interesting. We asked folks, which Scrum event do you find the most valuable for your team, for your team's
Mhm.
productivity in your agile transformation? To you and I, this might not be surprising, but to many, the fact that the sprint retrospective was by and large, by 54% of the respondents, the most valuable event for purposes of improving productivity. There's the continuous improvement. We got the numbers. I'm going to teach you how to run a retrospective well, and I'm
Mhm.
going to sell you on why you need to run a retrospective well, because it
Mhm.
has the numbers to back it up, right? How
Mhm.
many organizations are perhaps practicing Scrum, but are skipping the retrospective? And I don't mean to get dogmatic. That's not the point here. What I am illustrating is that, look, there's a reason why many of the practices continue to surface, because they are the ones that drive the most results. I'll end with this, or that point, with this additional view.
Mhm.
It's clear to me that people, including practitioners and coaches, don't understand the fact that Agile is a set of practices. It is a patterns approach to doing things. What's a pattern? Pattern is a practice that has shown to be successful over and over
Mhm.
in different organizations. We call the
Yeah.
Agile Manifesto values and principles, but those values and principles are based on the fact that they have worked very, very well.
Yeah. The funny part is that they've worked, but the fact that they continue to not be recognized for the fact that they worked even before they were put together into this thing called the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. I mean, think of it this way: the business people and technical people working day to day to derive value. If anybody reads the story of Apple back in the days of the Mac, they would recognize this almost immediately. What were the things that were done to bring the Mac to market? Exactly that principle talked about, and several others, of course, that were described in the Agile Manifesto. So it's nothing new, you know.
Yeah, this idea that what we're looking at, when you look at a framework, and I want to get the terminologies right so that people aren't um, losing their train of thought here.
Mhm.
Agile is a set of values and principles, an approach, it's a mindset. We call it that, but I want to be even more practical about it. Agile, those values and principles, they drive the actions that make you agile, right? The idea that
Mhm.
the frameworks that are applied are the practices that allow you to remain on that agile lane. That's a lot of convoluted um, talk there, so I want to be more specific. I have 110 practices
Mhm.
that have shown to work over and over and over and over. Right now, all of those practices are within the agile approach of those values and principles. Those practices, they're pattern, they're success patterns. They have an element that if you implement this, you should see similar results to what other organizations have seen. What are some of those patterns? Well, the idea that the teams that have business representation on the teams and work daily
Mhm.
together deliver value
Yep.
faster.
Involve the management.
Does that sound familiar? It comes directly
Yeah.
from the Agile Manifesto. That's a practice,
Yep.
right?
Involve the managers.
That is the idea that we take a product owner, we put them together with the team, we make them a part of the team, and that person
Mhm.
represents the business.
Mhm.
Incarnated value and
Right.
principle right there.
Right.
The idea that when we focus on one thing, we're more productive. When we reduce multitasking or context switching,
Mhm.
well, there are many ways how we can do that. There are practices
Yeah.
that enable that. So the idea that purpose is a much valuable or better motivator
Mhm.
than command and control could ever be,
Yeah.
right? And we have that in our, well, we have focus and we have purpose in our sprint goal. We have it in the product goal. We have it in on and on and on, right?
Yeah.
So these are things that we can connect to success
Mhm.
factors, practices that drive success, that a coach, that someone adopting
Mhm.
the agile approach, the agile mindset
Yeah.
must be familiar with,
Yeah.
must be coached
And I'm going to double click on what you said, because when someone's working with an individual or teams or even an organization at large, okay, and you're helping promote a particular practice for a particular purpose, it's more important to reinforce the fact that you're applying a practice not just to do the practice, okay, but for the experience of having done the practice and what that experience is teaching you, okay? What that experience is teaching you. It's like if you take a martial art and you start at the very basic level. Okay, I'm going to use an example I've used in the past before. I took judo when I was a child. In the first week, Ernesto, was learning how to fall. That's all we did for the first few lessons, learning how to fall. Okay, and immediately we started to make mistakes. But once the sensei went into the reason you're learning to fall is so that you don't hurt yourself, and you learn how not to hurt yourself so that you can get back up without having hurt yourself. In other words, the sensei reinforced the purpose behind the practice and the learning that you should be getting out of putting the exercise in practice. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's what we're missing a lot. We're missing a lot of folk. Well, we've got a lot of folks who are surface practicing, but not connecting to the purpose and the learning behind applying the practice. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping that in 2025 we can really get to, is get to the why, get to the purpose, get to the learning, okay? And get beyond the surface of these are the practices.
Yeah, I love that. And look, I want to put a positive on this. If you are trying to improve how your organization is running, whether you're a COO, whether you're on a PMO side, or whether you're in HR, if you've already implemented 110 practices and you've gotten all of those benefits, then more power to you. This is not for you, right? But if you're trying to figure out how to make your team more productive, how to get things done faster, how to deal with quality, maybe perhaps you're drowning on technical debt if you're in that scenario, then there are techniques available to you that you can begin to implement immediately. And they go beyond the framework. As I said, I'm looking at it now, all of the patterns, and maybe we'll do an entire session on that. We've been doing more and more postings around those. But the idea that there are techniques and practices out there that are practical. This is not somebody's opinion. These are things that have shown to work, and they go beyond the Agile framework implementation that you might have, whether it's Kanban, whether it's Scrum, whether it's SAFe, whether it's Scrum at Scale.
I'm glad you said that.
Things that you can use to improve.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because what's one of the things that's interesting about the patterns. And now, by the way, there's scaling patterns. We can talk about that and going into 2025. But the interesting thing about the patterns is that even though they've been somewhat put together primarily by folks in the Scrum community, fact is, a lot of this stuff can just be flat out used regardless of framework or approach. Okay, great. Let's say we have to do this waterfall for whatever reason. That's fine. There are certain approaches that rather patterns that why can't we do this? Why can't we use this in a traditional project anyways? I'll give you an example. Swarming. Okay, having the right people at the right place at the right time for a particular thing that's incredibly important. Okay, why can we not apply the swarming pattern regardless of context? You don't have to be using Scrum to use this, people. Okay, especially if you're doing something like critical chain, project management, you for certain want to manage those constraints that are critical by applying the most useful brain power to that particular thing. It would just make sense that you do that.
And I think we've come full circle, because your statement it's a brilliant way of saying that, look, you don't have to be using the framework in the way that they come off the shelf. There are hundreds of practices that are supported by these frameworks that you can cherry pick if you want. I don't know why you wouldn't want the whole thing. I mean, once I got a hold of how to improve organizations, then I wanted more of that, and
Yeah.
organizations continue on
Sure.
that mindset. So I think what we're seeing is a shift toward that desire, that appetite. Give me the good stuff that works. Don't give me an off-the-shelf solution. I've done that,
Right.
so I don't
Yeah.
need you for that.
And I'll double click on that statement again because I love it. And yes, and let's continue to do that as we improve ourselves. In other words, we are always looking for what other good practices can we bring in and mesh with what we're doing today to improve ourselves holistically. At some point, we might have to evolve a particular practice some certain way. We might even have to eliminate one. But when we do, we are doing so cognizantly, not just necessarily wantonly because it makes someone or some people uncomfortable for some particular reason. In other words, it has to tie back to the objectives that we're trying to do. Is this really not helping us get where we want to go? If not, if it's proving to be more in our way, if we're gonna do that kind of surgery, in other words, I'm gonna use a medical metaphor. If we're going to do that kind of surgery and we're going to remove that part of the body that we've already integrated previously for some reason, let's make sure that we're removing that body part for a right reason. Because if we end up needing it later, it'll be harder to put back.
Yeah. And I just think we're really at a moment where people need to understand what is it we do. They need to understand why they're doing what they're doing, and the evolution of that in terms of the maturity for that particular industry. In this case, the Agile industry, right? So I'm gonna add yet another example or another way of saying this. Large projects historically have been shown to be less successful than small projects. The smaller the project, the more success. So what's the solution there? What does that tell us? Well, why don't we chop up a project into smaller projects so that we can have success over and over and over? If that begins to smell like a sprint, that's the essence of iterations. So why do we work in sprints? Well, we don't work in sprints because Scrum tells us so. We work in sprints because the practice has shown to be successful over and over and over, the practice of working in small projects. Similarly, the idea that individuals in large groups create sub-team formations and have areas or miscommunication happens more frequently because of the distinct lines of communications that happen when you go above a certain number. That is simply a mathematical way of showing that things get confusing when we're in a large group. So what does that tell us? Well, we work better in a small team setting. So why don't we analyze what the maximum is before teams start to not care about each other, and put that in a room, which we call the Scrum team, no more than 10, right? Why does Scrum do that? Because the practice of smaller groups with a purpose becomes a team that is more productive than a large room. So these things must be understood. And there is intent in doing so, not because the guy tells us so,
Yeah.
or
And,
not because we've heard it, but because we understand why.
yep. Yeah.
And you're not going to put that practice in place because you've got an alternative that is working for you. More power to you.
yeah,
Right? We just find that these tend to be more successful over time.
Yeah. And I'm again double click on that, and I'm gonna unscrum it. If anybody looks at the research from team dynamics, I'm thinking about two fellows. I can't remember their names because I'm so used to saying their surnames. Katzenbach Smith. Just type that into Google. Katzenbach Smith talks about the evolution of groups of people to becoming a real team. Okay. This phrase of high performing teams kind of semi have been attributed to these pair of researchers. But the point is that was Scrum really around when they were doing, some of their initial research? No, at least not what we call Scrum. They were just looking at people working together, either disparately with different intentions and in different directions, versus when they came together and unified around a goal, okay, with some guiding principles to hold them together, some working agreements to hold them together, and bring them unifyingly to pursue their goals together, to support each other, to collaborate with each other, to coordinate with each other. They don't necessarily need Scrum to be a team. Okay, I know that's going to bother some people. They don't necessarily need Scrum to be a team. But if they were using Scrum, going back to the original statement, Scrum on top of these things will help strengthen, if you're trying your due diligence to do it, strengthen these bonds together and help surface the areas where we just need to improve the way we're working together more. Ernesto, we've got some rough edges and we need to smooth out those rough edges. Scrum will help surface where those rough edges are and make it apparent what work we need to do as individuals to be a better team as well. Okay. But
I love that. And I'm going to caveat that. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to capstone it by saying, do we need all that to become a team? No, but it helps.
That's it. And I want to underline that with another finding in the polls. And the question was, what is the biggest challenge your company encounters when working with Agile coaches? Number one answer, 37% said rigid framework applications being the number one problem, right? So this idea that, look, the reason why you hear very similar recommendations from coaches, and some coaches go about it in a very dogmatic form or way to implement it, is because they probably are giving you the biggest benefit that you can get at the moment, because maybe you're not running a retrospective. And having said that, the idea is that, look, you've got a menu of practices, all Agile based, all set to have shown success over and over and over. You can pick and choose. It does not have to be a framework. In fact, it could be a combination of framework or no framework at all. You'll still be Agile. You just will be choosing which aspects of it you want to implement, right? So very, very interesting finding, the idea that rigid framework implementation was was the biggest challenge that organizations.
There's a lot. There's a lot to unpack in that. In that question, I would like, and this is just a thought, maybe for 2025 to engage and unpack, because that's an onion of a question. There's a lot of stuff that could be feeding into that. But what I'm seeing and what I've heard from a lot of folks that you and I have worked with is that there is a rigidity out there, but what do they mean by rigidity? So we could do a little bit more research, there. And what were they being rigid within and about too? A lot of that stuff is the practices. Yes, we have a lot of zombie scrum there. I said it. Okay. Okay. All right. So if that upsets some folks, I get you, but there is a lot of zombie scrum out there. And the fact is that approach to using scrum is what's contributed a lot to some of management's misgivings about, is scrum useful to us or not? Okay. Is agile by implication useful to us or not? Because, you know, if we turn it into mindless execution, at some point you're going to hit some sort of fatigue. Okay. And just like has been said about change management, because there are some folks that have also in 2024 said, oh, the year of change management is dead and stuff. I mean, probably not as much as Agile has been said as dead, but change management is dead. It says, well, the fact is that anything that you do requires a little bit of every once in a while. And I don't just mean a breath, I mean a breather. Okay. And when you're going through some sort of transition, it needs to have its pauses. It needs to have its lower of intensity time periods to let people acclimate. And this is, again, one of the areas where someone who's coaching an organization needs to know when to help the organization slow down. Imagine me work, because we work as consultants too, right, Ernesto? But imagine me saying, folks, we need to slow down the change a little bit. That might be like, wait a minute, you're a consultant. I thought you were all about, hey, I'm also there for the health of my client. I don't want my clients to burn out. Okay. I don't want the people to burn out. I don't want the management to burn out, because the people burn out. They complain to the management. The management gets complained to enough. They get burnt out, and then nobody's happy.
Yeah. That's what I call the change fuel. There is a tank.
Oh, yeah.
And it's run out. So you got to use it wisely.
Correct.
Another thought on that is in the work itself. Today, I'm orienting around the patterns, just to drive that home more and more. There is a pattern that tells us that teams that complete their work early accelerate a lot faster than teams that work up until the last hour. So by that, what do we do with that? Well, if you give teams enough work to be able to do that more frequently, in other words, finish a day early, 2 days earlier, they actually will be faster the next time around, according to the data. In fact, it has been shown to be the strongest correlation between success in projects and non-successful projects. Teams that finish early accelerate faster. So why are we padding the teams or the people with so much work that it's actually slowing them down, right? We tend to worry about a problem that never happens, that our workers are going to run out of work. I've yet to see that happen, but everybody in the business worries about that.
That brings up what I call an upward cascading problem. The worry with speed is because the pressure of speed is because of the worry of speed, because of the fear of speed, and it bubbles up that way. So one of the things that's often missed is that reverse cascade investigation on the part of folks like ourselves, is to, I hate to say it, do a 5 whys upward as to what is it we think we are missing that we have to push this particular way. Okay. And get back to those sources of discomfort, okay, that generate demand, or at least perceived demand, that put us into this delivery only mode, and where in circumstances we end up setting ourselves into that mode of thinking where lean at all costs, when if you go back and you look at the principles of lean, that's ridiculous. That's antithetical. You don't want to run too lean. Okay. Any engine running off of any fuel has a mixture that is a certain lean and a little bit of waste. Anything running too lean ends up itself generating waste. It's almost, it's almost, contrary to what logic might think, but it's actually logical. You don't want to run too lean because that's actually risky.
And that's get a mimic.
And that's one of the things. That's one of the things that I think we, as I'll say it, an industry, really have not done well, or as well as we could have. Is what does sustainable pace look like, both for the people doing the work as well as delivery of customer outcomes? What does that look like? And do we end up setting ourselves up for failure with what are actually either unneeded customer expectations, okay, or unrealistic customer expectations, okay? In other words, are we doing it to ourselves?
Yeah, and doing it to ourselves, right? I'll just keep throwing patterns out there. The idea that rework is very expensive, right? Up to 24 times more costly than if we finish it and do it right the first time. To get it done so that we don't have to rework it, it's a big factor. So if we are too busy to bake quality, to observe a set of quality checks, aka a definition of done, we are doing it to ourselves, because we just increased our cost 24 times if we are doing that repetitively, right, over and over.
Yeah.
Here's an optimistic view. Here's a good one. And I'll connect these two because I find them very interesting. What is your perception of an agile transformation? And the number one answer there, 44% said challenging but beneficial. And I thought that's a pretty strong statement, right? Because this is not easy, but if you stick it out, if you see it through, it's very beneficial. Right? And then the second answer was also very interesting. The second one was that it is essential for growth. I thought, wow, that's a pretty good shot in the arm there for Agile, right? And then there was a poll in the last one. I'll go number wise to not bore everyone here, but the value of the Agile coach. So when we asked individuals to rate the effectiveness, or how happy are they with the value that their Agile coaches bring to them, 34% said that it's extremely valuable having an Agile coach in their organization. And then 28% said very valuable. But 22% said not valuable. And I thought that was the interesting number there. 22% of the participants said that having an Agile coach doesn't add value to them. And we continue to come back to this theme of Agile changing, Agile evolving. Well, ineffective Agile might be dying. But those that are getting that benefit, they want more of it. That's live and kicking, right?
That may be another one of those onion type of questions that for 2025 bears unpacking. And you know what? Maybe that might be a live working webinar that you and I want to host, and invite people who said no to work through some of that anonymously. We don't want anybody losing their jobs, okay? But work through that anonymously, at least comfortably anonymously, that we can unpeel that onion. I mean, I have my suspicions of what they mean by no, okay? Not to toot my own horn, but I've spoken about it in 2023 and 2024 about that particular hashtag. Hashtag no such thing as an agile coach. It has been because I have heard the clamoring of those 22% of the no's, and I'm surprised, and I'm actually surprised that it was that low, to be quite honest with you. Because
I was surprised that it was that high.
I've heard some stories, Ernesto. I got to tell you.
Yeah, we that's the ugly, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly. I was surprised that it was that high. That's a lot of agile coaches.
Well, it would also depend on who responded from where. I've found that a lot from certain circles, and maybe that's something for us to talk about in 2025, is where those things have been found. It might be curious to some to find out, where that discomfort has been sitting, and you actually hit on it a little bit earlier. A lot of what I've heard about the discomfort about the no, they're not valuable, have come from folks that were working in what I'll call incredibly large initiatives. I'm talking about initiatives that involved more than 250 to 500 people, some even bigger than that. By and large,
referring to SAFE. You're beating around the bush.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I'm not saying that. I could, but I'm not. But by and large, the number of folks who gave that far out of a negative perception of the coaching they were receiving, and I'm lumping in Scrum Masters there as well. Okay, I'm not forgetting you folks as well. It was ineffective. Okay, and it was those larger those larger things. Okay, because some of them were service offerings, some of them were product offerings, and stuff. Some of them where they had 12 disparate things that were in of themselves different projects, and they were lumped together, and there is our product, these 12 projects together, and they had nothing to do with each other. They had little overlap at all whatsoever. And again, for better or for worse, it's the decision that the organization made, and the people are making the best of it. And while I won't sugarcoat it too much more, if you're going to be a coach in a situation like that, you cannot be applying surface level practices and approaches. You cannot.
And it's going to get even more difficult for organizations, implementing SAFE. SAFE recently, in the website, implemented a change that I thought was disappointing. And in full spirit, I'm SPCIM SAFE certified. I help organizations adopt SAFE. I use it as a tool, like I use Scrum at Scale and all other frameworks and the patterns that I've been talking about. I think different organizations have different needs. Every transformation is a fingerprint, and the more tools you have available, the more value you can bring. But with SAFE putting their content behind a paywall, that was disappointing.
Yeah, I have to admit, that was disappointing to me as well. I can't judge as to the rationale behind their thinking, but I have to think it not just taken positively by the community at large. Okay, I have to wonder as to, for anyone who wants to learn about the ideas promoted within SAFE, that must be discouraging. And as a coach, as a scrum master, I cannot stand behind something that dis promotes. In other words, does not promote learning. Okay.
Yeah, well, let's face it, right? It's the monetization of that of that particular content that had been widely
Yeah.
available to folks, and I think it had done Save very well to have it freely widely available. I know Dean Leffingwell was very proud of the fact that it was a body of knowledge that was widely available to everyone. And
Yeah.
if you wanted to implement it and needed professional services, there's a whole industry behind that. Now the content itself is also part of that monetization, and that's okay. I get it, right? I understand. It's just it was so widely available before. I think now it's going to hamper that knowledge sharing that individuals were enjoying before, and it's going to make the implementation more difficult for organizations for that reason. Right? You mentioned a couple of times, and I didn't want to interrupt you, Marcelo, but I think it might be worth to post the link to the survey, the end of year survey that we are running now. That is more in depth, right? It goes deeper than the individual polls, so that we're able to get a reading for what were the top priorities from an Agile implementation for your organization, and what are the top priorities for 2025. So folks, take a minute to fill that out. It shouldn't take you more than, I would say, 3 minutes. It's 13 questions, and there's just bam, 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 very easy to fill them out. It gives us a lot of insight in terms of the industry. We try to be agile around collecting data and sharing it, so that you don't have to wait on that to be processed for months and then get a big bang approach. We are agile in everything we do. So this is a very agile way of collecting a snapshot of the industry as it pertains to 2024 and what you might be doing in 2025. Take a minute to fill that out. I think our producer just put that up. So please go ahead and fill out that survey. And then we're going to be sharing that in our upcoming webinar in the middle of January. That is going to be a readout for the full set of data on the polls, as well as the survey. So you see the survey coming across the screen here. Go ahead and click on that.
And you know, that's one of the things that I want to encourage everybody. And don't worry about it. We'll be reposting it on on our channel on LinkedIn and YouTube again. So it'll be part of the posting of this webinar. So if you didn't catch it right now, don't worry. You could always come back. But the one thing I want to encourage you to do is to go and do it and tell your friends, because one of the things that you'll find out about us, okay, is that we give back. In other words, you're giving us your doggone data, you're giving us your insights, you're giving us your pain points. We're not going to keep it, folks. We're going to share it back. We're going to obviously share it anonymously, but the data will go back out there so you can get your own insights about what you're seeing, and hopefully not feel alone. So this is not going into a black hole. This is not just going into our pockets. We're going to turn around and share it right back with the community. And then, what's interesting, Ernesto, is I'll say it this way, sets us apart, is that we're actually going to ask you, so what do you think? What do you guys feel about this sort of stuff?
I love that.
We always want to hear from everyone. It's one of the things that I've enjoyed about, engaging in these webinars that you and I have done together this year, is when people have actually jumped in, thrown questions, and sometimes even flung arrows at us. Okay. By now the wounds have healed, because we want you guys to feel that you have your voice and connected to everything going on at large, and not feel alone by yourselves.
Yeah, well said. Well said, Marcelo. Let's wrap up our end of year statement. So where did you see 2024? Where do you see 2025? Are you able to do that in 2 sentences, one for each?
Okay. 2024, glad the ride is over. 2025. Okay. let's get to work, everybody.
Yeah.
Let's get to
well,
work.
well said. I would add to that, 2024 was a very interesting year. We've seen the biggest shift in behavior and in the appetite that individuals have for detailed, actionable um, practices. And in 2025, I expect to see a growth in that. I expect to see a larger appetite for proving methods, proven practices that are going to improve specific aspects to meet a goal. And we're really, really looking forward to being a part of that. So make sure that you sign up and register for our upcoming survey. I think our producer has also put in the link there. I'm sorry, the survey we already touched on. The webinar coming up on January, so that you are part of that readout and we get to hear from you, as Marcelo said, and we get to forecast what 2025 might look like. There are going to be some tips in there in terms of the most popular initiatives that you might be able to borrow for your particular journey as well. All right. With that, Marcelo, I want to wish you the best end of year, Happy New Year, holidays. Looking forward to 2025.
Absolutely.
And likewise to all of our listeners and followers out there.
Yeah. I want to say thank you to you, Ernesto, and to the team. 2024 was a challenging year. Couldn't have gotten through it without your support. I want to say thank you to our clients for believing in us and going on the journeys that they've gone on with us, to our students from our classes. Again, the same. Thank you for coming to us and entrusting your growth and your learning. And please continue to engage with us. And we're looking forward to what comes in 2025. Ernesto, thank you so much. I wish you only the best, and everyone else, the same goes to you.
Likewise, Marcelo. Thank you. Big virtual hug. All right.
Big hug out there, folks.